Skies over Oahu, Hawaii. The drone of the C-47's engines vibrates through your bones as the island comes into view below a paradise scarred black. Smoke still curls from the harbor like the breath of some wounded beast, thick and acrid, blotting out the sun. You can almost taste the oil on the wind whipping through the open cargo door. Petty Officer Edward C. Raymer leans forward, his face pressed to the window, heart pounding not from fear, but from the raw fury rising in his chest. The Japanese had struck yesterday, and now, as one of the Navy's elite salvage divers flown in from the mainland, he's hurtling toward the inferno they left behind. The plane banks sharply, and Pearl Harbor unfolds like a nightmare canvas. Battleship Row, a line of once mighty giants, now twisted and broken. The USS Arizona lies gutted, her superstructure a smoldering skeleton, flames licking at the waterline where oil slicks burn in iridescent hellfire. Beside her, the USS Oklahoma, capsized like a beached whale, her hull upturned and riddled with torpedo gashes. USS West Virginia and California list heavily, half submerged in the muck, their decks awash with debris. And the eerie silence of the dead. Raymer's jaw tightens. He's seen schematics, trained for wrecks, but this is war's raw wound, pulsing with the chaos of men scrambling below tugs hosing down fires, cranes groaning under loads of twisted steel, and the distant wail of sirens cutting through the haze. As the wheels touch down on Ford Island's scarred runway, the jolt snaps Raymer back. He grabs his Gear Mark V, diving helmet, weighted boots, the canvas suit that feels like a second skinning. Steps out into the heat. The air hits him like a punch, the stench of burning fuel, cordite, and something worse, something human. Move it, Raymer, barks Chief Bosun's mate Bill Reed, his dive team leader, herding the men toward a waiting jeep. They're a crack unit, hand-picked for the impossible. Navy frogmen trained in the art of underwater salvage, men who breathe compressed air and wrestle with the sea's secrets. Under Admiral Chester W. Nimitz's urgent orders, they're here to resurrect the Pacific Fleet from its watery grave. The jeep races along the waterfront, past sailors with soot-streaked faces hauling hoses, medics tending to the wounded on stretchers lined like cordwood. Raymer spots the salvage barge moored near the dry docks, its deck cluttered with air compressors, winches, and coils of hose thick as a man's arm. "Welcome to hell, boys," mutters Warrant Officer Frank Whitaker, the grizzled vet assigning their billets. His eyes are bloodshot, voice hoarse from shouting orders since dawn yesterday. "We've got men trapped down there Oklahoma, Utah, maybe even Arizona's bowels. You dive at first light, rescue first, then salvage. Fail, and the Japs win the war before it starts." Raymer nods, but inside, adrenaline surges. He's no stranger to the deep years of training in murky bays, patching holes on peacetime wrecks. But this is different. The harbor water laps black and oily against the piers, hiding God knows what beneath. Sharks, drawn by blood. Unexploded ordnance. The ghosts of brothers. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the wreckage, Raymer climbs aboard the barge. The crew gathers divers like Metalsmith, First Class, John Anderson, and Seaman Bill Taylor. Tough men with calloused hands and unyielding grit. They pore over blueprints under lantern light. Arizona's 14-inch guns silenced forever. West Virginia's compartments flooded to her turret roofs. California's engineering space is a drowned labyrinth. Night falls heavy. The harbor a symphony of creaks and distant explosions as ammunition cooks off in the heat. Raymer lies in his bunk, staring at the overhead, the weight of the mission pressing down. How do you raise a fleet from ruin? How do you face the darkness where men scream their last? But dawn will come, and with it, the first descent. Little does he know, the horrors waiting below will test not just his skills, but his very soul. What secrets lie entombed in those steel coffins? And can one man's dive spark the resurrection of an empire's might? December 9th, 1941. Pearl Harbor's oily dawn. The barge rocks gently as the first pale light bleeds across the water. Edward C. Raymer stands at the edge. Mark V helmet already bolted down, the heavy breastplate pressing like a judgment. His tender strong backs like Bill Reed and John Anderson check the lines one last time. Air hose, lifeline, telephone cable, snaking over the rail. The harbor still reeks of fuel and death. Floating debris bobs in the slick, and somewhere a gull cries like a warning. First dives on Arizona, Reed says. Voice low. Recon only. Get in. Map the damage. Get out. No heroics. Raymer nods, the helmet's faceplate fogging slightly with his breath. He knows the Arizona's Her magazine detonated in a cataclysmic flash that tore her apart, killing over 1,000 men in seconds. But orders are orders. Assess if anything can be salvaged, if compartments hold air pockets, if there's even a ghost of a chance. He steps onto the descending stage, weights clanking, and the winch lowers him slow into the black. The water closes over like oil. Visibility drops 2 inches, murky soup, thick with fuel and ash. Raymer's boots touch the tilted deck near the forward turrets. He feels the give of warped steel underfoot. The Mach the Fifth's exhaust bubbles roar in his ears. A constant thunder. He moves by feel, gloved hands tracing the railings he studied in blueprints the night before. Every step is deliberate. A loose plate could snag his lines. A falling girder could crush him. And below, the dead weight. He reaches a companionway, drops down ladder by ladder into the superstructure. Total darkness, nound light, penetrates this far. The cold seeps through the suit, numbing fingers. His flashlight beam cuts feeble yellow slashes, catching glimpses. A boot floating free, papers drifting like ghosts, the glint of brass fittings. Then the smell through the helmet vents, faint but unmistakable. Decay bodies trapped when the ship went down fast, now swelling in the warm water. Raymer's heart hammers, he reports up the telephone, voice steady despite the knot in his throat. Heavy damage forward magazine go. No survivors expected, but he pushes deeper, toward the engine rooms. The hull groans metal, settling, or perhaps something shifting under pressure. A sudden current tugs at him. He braces against a bulkhead, then his hand brushes something soft. Cloth. Flesh. A sailor's arm. Still in sleeve. Drifting loose. Freezes. The moment stretches eternal darkness. The hiss of air. The weight of what he's touching. He forces himself to mark the location on his slate. Evidence. Recovery will come later. For now, survival. On the surface, the tender's weight. Faces grim. When Raymer finally surfaces oil-coated, helmet-dripping Blackie hauls himself aboard shaking. She's broken in half, he gasps, ripping off the helmet. No way to raise her hull, but we can strip what we need: guns, machinery. Keep the fight going. The team absorbs it, in silence. Arizona is lost as a ship, but not as a resource. Raymer's dive is the first proof. The deep can be faced. It can be worked. And if Arizona is beyond resurrection, her sisters aren't. Word spreads fast. Next target. The upright wrecks West Virginia and California torpedoed but not exploded. Their hulls hold but intact enough to patch. Divers like Raymer will descend again, this time to seal the breaches from inside and out. Massive wooden cofferdams. Cofferdams. The size of houses will be built, topside, lowered, and bolted by men groping in the void. Then pumps. Endless pumps. To claw the ships back from the bottom. But first, the trapped. Rumors swirl, tapping heard inside Oklahoma's upturned hull. Men alive, pounding on steel, waiting for rescue. Raymer's team gears up again that afternoon. If there's a chance Van want to pull brothers from the dark, they'll take it. As the sun climbs higher, baking the oil-slicked water. Raymer stares at the capsized Oklahoma. Her keel breaks the surface like a whale's back. Somewhere inside, in air pockets shrinking by the hour, men endure. How long can they last? And what horrors will the next die reveal? Echoes from the hull, December 10th, 1941. Mid-morning, the capsized hulk of USS Oklahoma. The barge heaves under the weight of cutting torches, acetylene tanks, and the grim determination of men who refuse to quit. Edward C. Raymer stands on the upturned keel now. The deck his boots planted on what was once the starboard side. The sun beats down mercilessly, turning the black oil, coating everything into a sticky tar that clings to skin and soul alike. But it's not the heat that chills him. It's the sound. Tep, tep, tep. Faint at first, like distant Morse code, carried on the wind. Then clearer, insistent, coming from inside the steel tomb beneath their feet. Raymer drops to one knee, ear pressed to the hot metal. The rhythm is unmistakable. SOS. Over and over. Brothers alive in the dark, pounding on bulkheads with whatever they have left wrenches. Fists. Hope. The tapping had started almost immediately after the capsizing, heard by sailors on nearby Maryland and rescue boats. But now, days later, it's weaker. Time is bleeding out with every bubble of air that escapes. Civilian shipyard foreman Julio de Castro and his crew had already cut through the hull in frantic hours. On the 7th and 8th, pulling 32 men to safety exhausted, oil-soaked, but breathing, they used oxyacetylene torches, guided by general plans, blueprints, pinpointing locations where the knocks were loud. Food and water passed down through the new holes. Cheers when each man emerged. But 32 is not enough. Hundreds more remain trapped. The divers know it. The tapping tells them. Raymer's team joins the effort. They rig staging platforms over the exposed bottom plating now, the top of the inverted ship. Tortes flare. Blue-eyed as metalsmiths burn through 1.5-inch armor. Sparks rain like deadly fireworks. Every cut risks explosion. Trapped fuel vapors. Unexploded ordnance. One wrong spark, and the whole section could ignite. Raymer descends again, this time through one of the fresh holes. The Mark V suit feels heavier than ever. He squeezes into the narrow gap, flashlight beams slicing through smoke and water. Inside, the ship is upside down. Decks become ceilings. Ladders point the wrong way. He crawls along what was once a passageway, now a horizontal tunnel flooded to waist height in places. The air pocket is shrinking. The water rises with every tide. He finds them in a forward compartment. 3 sailors huddled against a bulkhead, faces gaunt, eyes wide in the sudden light. One clutches a hammer, knuckles raw and bleeding from endless signaling. They whisper hoarsely names. Ranks. Please. Raymer signals topside. 3 more. Alive ropes. Lower. One by one, they're hauled up. Blinking into daylight they thought they'd never see again. But for every success, the horror multiplies. In adjacent spaces, no tapping. Only silence. And when divers push deeper, they find the reason. Bodies wedged in escape routes. Drowned when hatches were dogged to save other compartments. Preserved eerily in airtight pockets. Some still in prayer circles. Hands clasped. The sight burns into Raymer's memory like acid. The rescues taper off. The last tapping fades by December 11th. No more knocks. Only the creak of settling steel and the lap of oily water. The divers shift focus. Salvage, not rescue. Oklahoma will not be raised, quickly her damage to severe. Her value now in parts, but West Virginia and California wait upright. Their hulls patched from the inside by men like Raymer groping through flooded engine rooms, welding cofferdams. In near-zero visibility, battling the bends and the blacks. Pumps roar, day and night. Massive wooden pachism, 60 feet long, are maneuvered into place by frogmen swimming blind. Air is forced in to blow water out, compartment by compartment. Slowly, defiantly, the ships begin to rise. Raymer surfaces after one grueling shift. Helmet off, face streaked with oil and sweat. He looks at the Oklahoma's silent hull. The tapping has stopped forever, but the work continues. Because if they can bring these giants back, the fleet can strike back. Revenge is brewing in dry docks and machine shops. And one more dive might be the difference between defeat and Midway's turning point. What price will the next resurrection demand? And can the divers keep facing the deep when it keeps claiming its own? The resurrection begins late, December 1941 into early 1942. Pearl Harbor's relentless rhythm of pumps and hammers. The Oklahoma's hull lies silent now, a capsized monument stripped of hope. Edward C. Raymer turns his gaze to the upright Rexiuses, West Virginia and USS California, where The real miracle of resurrection can still take root. These battleships took multiple torpedo hits, but held their keels down, settled into the mud instead of rolling over. Their damage is catastrophic, yet fixable. Captain Homer N. Wallen, the salvage wizard overseeing the entire operation under Admiral Nimitz's mandate, has made the call. Prioritize the less destroyed giants. Arizona is a memorial in waiting. Oklahoma to mangled for quick return. But West Virginia and California, they can fight again. Raymer's team shifts to California first. The ship lists heavily to port. Her quarterdeck awash. Torpedo holes gaping like wounds in her side. Divers descend into the flooded engineering. Space is dark. Oil-choked corridors where machinery looms like drowned beasts. Raymer gropes forward in total blackness. The Mark V suit's exhaust roaring. His hands memorizing every valve, every hatch from pre-attack blueprints committed to muscle memory. Visibility is zero. Touch is everything. They weld massive wooden patches over the torpedo gaseous cofferdams, constructed topside by civilian shipyard carpenters, then lowered by crane, and secured by frogmen swimming blind. The patches are enormous, 60 feet long, braced with steel beams, sealed with oakum and cement. Raymer and his tenders bolt them in place, fighting currents and the constant threat of shifting debris. One wrong move, and a patch could tear free, flooding the work again. Sharks circle the blood-tainted water, unexploded ordnance waits in the silt-like hidden mines. Pumps start dozens of them, roaring across the harbor. Compressed air forces water out. Compartment. Slowly, the California begins to rise. Inch by tortured inch. The list corrects. Her main deck emerges from the muck, dripping, scarred, but defiant. By March 1942, she's afloat enough for dry dock. Crews swarm her, stripping damaged guns for spares, offloading ammunition to lighten the load further. Raymer surfaces after a 12-hour shift. Helmet off, face black with oil, lungs burning from the foul air below. She's coming up. He tells Reed over coffee that tastes like rust. But West Virginia, that's the real beast. West Virginia took 7 torpedo 7-hand bombs that gutted her port side. Her hull is a sieve. The salvage plan escalates. Build an even larger cofferdam around the worst damage. A wooden fence bolted directly to the submerged quarterdeck, turning flooded sections into dry workspaces. Divers descend to rig the supports, working in zero visibility, guided only by feel and the faint telephone voice from above. Falling objects lose plates, tools become deadly projectiles in the dark. Bodies still drift in some compartments, preserved in oil, a constant, eerie reminder. Raymer pushes deeper than most. On one dive, he navigates a flooded passageway, flashlight dead, relying on the blueprint in his head. His hand brushes something cold and soft, another sailor, long gone. He marks it, continues. The work is relentless. Patch, pump, repeat. The ship groans as pressure equals. In May 1942, after months of grinding effort, West Virginia rights herself enough to float free. She rises like a leviathan reclaimed from the depth soils licked. Battered, but unbroken. The harbor echoes with cheers as tugs pull her toward the yard. Raymer watches from the barge, exhausted but electric. These aren't just ships returning. They're vengeance incarnate. Guns from California and West Virginia will arm other vessels. Machinery salvaged will keep the fleet moving. And the diversmen like Mattel Smith's first class, John Anderson, who nearly drowned when a patch collapsed. Warrant Officer Frank Whitaker, who lost browsers to the bends of proven the impossible possible. Word reaches the fleet. The battleships are rising. Nimitz's strategy holds. The Pacific Fleet, thought crippled, is rebuilding in secret. By mid-1942, California and West Virginia head to Puget Sound for full reconstruction, new anti-aircraft batteries, modern radar, fire control that will make them deadlier than before. But the cost mounts. Divers suffer the bends, crushed limbs, poison gas pockets. Some don't surface. Raymer feels every loss like a weight in his chest. Yet the mission drives on. Nevada, too, is race-beached briefly. Then the fleet grows stronger. As 1942 wears on, Raymer stands on the rebuilt West Virginia's deck, during a test cruise. The ship steams proud, guns gleaming under fresh paint. Revenge is no longer a dream, it's steel and fire, ready for the sea. The turning point approaches. Midway looms. On the horizon, these resurrected giants will be there. But the divers' war never ends. New battles, call Guadalcanal, Salvage under fire. The deep still hungers. How far will one man's courage carry when the next wreck waits? Vengeance forged in steel, June 4th to 7th, 1942. The Battle of Midway, North Pacific waters. The resurrected battleships do not steam into the heart of the fight, not yet. Their guns stay silent on this turning point of the war. California and West Virginia remain in Puget Sound, still undergoing the massive rebuild that will transform them into fast, radar-guided Avengers. Nevada, raised and patched but not fully modernized, waits in Pearl for her own resurrection. Yet the divers' work has already changed everything. Without the salvage miracle at Pearl Harbor, there would be no carriers left to defend Midway. The fleet's repair yards, dry docks, and machine shops spared total destruction hum, with salvaged parts stripped from the sunken giants. Turret machinery from Arizona, armor plate from Oklahoma, 5-inch guns from West Virginia's early patches all flow into the repair of Enterprise, Hornet, Yorktown. The divers' hands, scarred and oil-blackened, have kept the carriers afloat when every other battleship lay broken. Edward C. Raymer stands on the deck of the repair barge, USS Vestal now, a floating workshop watching. Distant smoke trails on the horizon, reports crackle over the radio. Pilots from Midway and the carriers are tearing into the Japanese fleet. 4 carriers, Bernakagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. The tide turns in ours. Raymer's radio operator shouts the news. It's happening. We're breaking them. He feels no elation, only a deep, quiet burn. The men he pulled from Oklahoma's hull, the ones who died in California's engine rooms, the faces preserved in West Virginia's flooded passages stay, are here in this victory. Every pump stroke, every blind weld in the dark, every dive into poisoned water has fed this moment. The fleet that should have been crippled for years is striking back before the Japanese can consolidate. By Kimpur, the work never stops. Raymer's team moves to Nevada Beach deliberately on December 7th to save her from sinking outright, now being refloated with the same brutal ingenuity. Massive chains and winches haul her off the mud. Divers clear propellers, fouled with coral and debris. By late 1942, she too steams for the West Coast yards. All 3 California, West Virginia, Nevada emerge in 1943-44 as reborn monsters, bristling with 40mm and 20mm anti-aircraft guns, new fire control directors, radar that sees through night and smoke. They become the ghost ships the Japanese believed sunk forever. Raymer, promoted to Chief Petty Officer, dives less, now directing from the surface, training the next wave of frogmen. But the memories never fade. He still wakes sometimes to the tap-tap-tap of trapped men, still feels the cold brush of a dead sailor's hand in the black. The bends have left him with aching joints. The oil has scarred his lungs. Yet when West Virginia returns to Pearl in July 1944 fully rebuilt, guns gleaming, he stands on her quarterdeck as she steams past the Arizona Memorial, the ship he helped raise fires, a salute. The water trembles. The fleet surges forward. Leyte Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, West Virginia's 16-inch shells pound Japanese positions. California's radar-guided fire shreds kamikaze waves. Nevada, the cheerful old battle wagon, anchors the bombardment line at Utah Beach during D-Day, and Europe proved the Pacific salvage effort rippled across oceans. Raymer watches from a repair tender off Ulithi Atoll in late 1944. The harbor is crowded with carriers, battleships, destroyers all, fed by the resurrection he helped begin. One diverse courage, multiplied by hundreds, has turned ruin into resurgence. He thinks of Admiral Nimitz's words, spoken quietly during an inspection tour. You men didn't just save ships, you saved the war. The deep still claims lives, new wrecks from torpedoes, mines, storms. But the divers keep going down. Because every time a ship rises, the enemy loses a little more. Raymer removes his helmet after one final symbolic dive on West Virginia in 1945. Touching the patched hull he helped seal years before. The war is ending. Japan is broken. The ghosts can rest. But a lesson endures. From the bottom of Pearl Harbor rose not just steel, but unbreakable will. And in the silence, after the guns fall quiet, one question remains. What happens when the last diver surfaces and the wrecks are finally allowed to sleep?